Alright, we got the turn signal cam and switch assembly and all that installed in place. I got it screwed down, and before you go any further, you just kind of want to test it, make sure that everything works, it's not binding on anything. So that seems to be working pretty good. And you can also check over here on the side where your hazard button comes through. That lines up good. So the next thing we got to do is we're going to roll this over and then come on down here, right down in here, and install our ignition switch. Okay, our ignition switch goes on like so. The rod, the linkage, needs to be pointed up. And down here, kind of on the side, you'll see this little slot there. That's where that rod slides into. And the way this mounts, zoom that out a little bit, you take the rod, make sure the rod goes in that little slot. The switch may not be, there we go. Put the switch on there, and then you just put the bolts in. You get those bolts in. They use a 5/16. I'm using a nut driver, but a socket wrench or nut driver, whatever you want to use. Snug these down, and that part's done. Now before you move on to the next step, go ahead and get your keys and test everything and make sure that the ignition switch, the linkage and all that is working properly. That it particularly that when you're in the start position, that when you let go it springs back. That's the most important. So everything seems to be working good there. Now we'll move on to getting this bracket mounted. Alright, getting this bracket mounted, you really can't do it wrong. All you just need to remember is to have the turn signal wiring go under the bracket. And if you look here, the distance between this captured nut and this captured nut is different than the distance from here to here. So I'll kind of show you that, and hopefully that shows up on film. But there's only one way that this bracket can go on there, so it's really quite foolproof. So you just stick that on there, put your nuts in place, uses a 1/2 inch socket wrench or a nut driver. You just put all 4 of those down, tighten them down, and that part's done. Last thing to mount, I almost forgot, but there's this little plate. It's got a little hole in it. It's actually a mount for like one of those little Christmas tree plugs. It goes on there and it holds the some of the wiring for the turn signal. So this goes on there, uses these 2 bolts towards the end, towards the firewall end of the shaft. So just put that on there and put your bolts in, and that part's done.